Now, before we start off with the topic net present value, let's look into a related topic, the calculation of compound interest. Now, in the upcoming video, I want you to observe the movement of the numbers very carefully so that you will get to know the calculation even before I start explaining. So how is the compound interest calculated here? You have started off with an investment of $100 in year 0. Year 0 means now. And you are getting interest at the rate of 10%. So $100, which is your investment amount, multiplied by 10%, you get an interest of $10. So at the end of the year, you are left with an investment of $100, that's your principal or the initial investment, plus the interest of 10, giving a total amount of $110. Now, this $110 becomes the investment amount at the beginning of the next year. And you're again getting 10% interest on $110, which is $11. So at the end of the next year, you will be left with the $110, that is the investment at the beginning of the year, plus $11 interest, giving a total investment value of $121. So this was the calculation of compound interest. Now, the initial investment is known by the name present value. Now, in this particular calculation, how have we arrived at the future value of $121? Future value is nothing but the investment value at the end of the period. We have calculated it by way of a tabular method. If there are more number of years, then the table gets extended. So we need a formula for calculating the future value. And the formula for calculating future value is FV is equal to PV into 1 plus R the whole raised to N, where FV stands for future value, PV stands for present value, R the rate of interest, and N the number of years. So after the first year, the future value is $110. So, which means that present value is $100. 1 plus R. R is 10%, which means that it is 0.1. And N, because it's at the end of first year, N or the number of years will be equal to 1. So, the answer works out to $110, which is the very same figure that we have got under the tabular method. Now, moving to year 2. In year 2, the present value is again $100. Into 1 plus 0.1, again the rate of interest is 10%. But since it is a second year, N becomes 2 because number of years is 2. And the answer works out to $121, which is the same figure that we have got under the tabular method. So whenever we need to find out the future value, we could adopt this formula, that is FV is equal to PV into 1 plus R the whole raised to N. Now, from this formula of future value, we know that $100 received now will get converted to $121 after 2 years at an interest rate of 10%, which means that $100 received now will not be equal to $100 received after 2 years. Why? Because $100 received now will earn interest and it will get converted to a higher amount in future. But if we receive $100 after 2 years, then basically we are losing the interest in the intermittent period. So this is known as the time value of money, or $100 received now is better than $100 received in future. Now, from this formula of future value, we can derive the formula of present value as well. So what is present value? Present value is equal to future value into 1 divided by 1 plus R the whole raised to N. What we have just done is we have taken 1 plus R the whole raised to N to the left side of the equation. So it becomes 1 divided by 1 plus r, the whole raised to n. So now we've got the formula for present value. Now this method of finding out the present value is known by the term discounting. Now discounting is exactly the opposite of compounding. What was compounding? Compounding is finding out the future value, while discounting is finding out the present value. And this 1 divided by 1 plus r, the whole raised to n, is known by a name. And that name is discount factor, or it is also known as interest rate, or it is also known as the cost of capital. So this term is very important, cost of capital. Now, what exactly do you mean by cost of capital? Now, for any company, from where do you get the funds? We get the funds from the shareholders and also from the long-term loans. Now, for the shareholders, what is the amount that they expect in return for the investment? They expect dividend from the company, right? And what about the long-term loans? They expect to get interest for the funds that they have given. So cost of capital is actually the average interest and dividend percentage. So in this particular case, we will assume the cost of capital is 10%. Now this 10% is very important because it means that the people who has given us funds expect a return of 10% for that. So whenever we are investing their funds, we should ensure that those investments get a return of above 10%. Only then we will be able to give 10% to the people who have given us funds, right? So that is why this cost of capital is very important. Now let's understand the formulas that we have already learned. Future value is equal to present value into 1 plus r, the whole raised to n. So in the illustration that we studied, when we invested $100 in year 0, that is now, that is equivalent to the present value, then when the rate of interest is 10%, that is 0.1, and when n is 2, then the future value will be $121. This is what we saw in the formula of future value. Now let's take the reverse case, that is discounting. So coming to this formula, that is finding out the present value. Now, if the future value is $121, then we have to find out the present value. That is, what is the amount to be invested now to get $121 after 2 years? At what rate of interest? At 10%. So when you substitute these figures in the equation, what is the present value that we get? $100, right? So what we are trying to find out from the present value is what is the amount to be invested now to get a certain sum of amount in the future. Now consider yourself as an employee of an organization and the CFO comes to you and says that there is a certain investment opportunity that is coming up. The cash inflows after 2 years is $121 and the cost of capital is 10%. What was the cost of capital? The cost of capital is the return that is expected by the lenders and the shareholders. You immediately calculate in year 2, the cash flows is $121. You make a note of it. And the discount factor or the cost of capital is 10%. You make a note of that too. And you calculate the discount factor. What was the formula for discount factor? 1 divided by 1 plus r, the whole raised to n. So in this particular case, r is 10% or 0.1. And since the cash inflows are coming in after 2 years, n is 2. So what is the discount factor? Discount factor is 0.826. So in order to find out the present value, we know that the future value of $121 has to be multiplied with the discount factor. So you immediately multiply the future value, that is $121, with the discount factor, that is 0.826, to get the present value as 100. That is 121 into 0.826 gives 100. So what is the meaning of this? The amount that you have to invest now to get $121 at an interest rate of 10% is just $100. That is what you have calculated. So if the CFO says that the investment that we are going to make in year zero for this particular investment opportunity is $120, will you agree to that investment opportunity? No, right? Because you are very sure that the maximum amount that you can invest is only $100. If you invest, say, $120 or say any amount above $100, then we are not going to get 10% return. Now, since the cost of capital is 10%, can we take a chance of investing in any opportunity where the return is less than 10%? No, right? So obviously, you cannot make an investment of $120 now, which yields only $121 in the future. So what you're going to say to the CFO is $121, if you're going to get after 2 years, then the maximum amount that you can invest now is just $100, which means that if you invest an amount of $120 in year zero means now, whatever investment is taking place now, in order to convert it into present value terms, you have to just multiply it with 1 because now is the present. So $120 invested now will yield a return of less than 10%. Now, what is this $120? $120 is the amount that you're going to invest now, or it is the present value of cash outflows, what is going out of the company. And when you found out the present value of cash inflows, you got just $100, which means that the outflows is greater than the inflows. So if you take the net of it, it will end up as a negative figure. It's a loss, right? Now, this present value of cash inflows minus the present value of cash outflows is known by the name net present value or NPV. So in this particular investment opportunity, how have we evaluated whether we should make an investment or not? We have to find out what are the cash inflows that will come from that investment opportunity. So in this particular case, there is a cash inflow that is coming in year 2, $121. So we take in year 2, $121. And then what we have to do is we have to find out what is the maximum amount that we should invest now so that we get an interest rate of 10%. Why should we get an interest rate of 10%? Because that is the cost of capital, or that is the minimum return that is expected from us by the shareholders or the lenders. So that is why we are taking 10% as the interest rate that we want. So we got the discount factor as 0.826. And then we can find out the present value by multiplying the future value with the discount factor. So that is why we have multiplied $121 into 0.826. So we got the present value as $100. Now, what do you mean by present value? It's the amount that we have to invest now to get an interest of 10%. The next step is to look into the details of the investment opportunity. What is the amount that we have to invest now? So in the particular question, they have said the investment in year 0 is $120. But we have already found out that we have to invest only $100 to get an interest rate of 10%. Anything above $100, we will not get 10% interest. So $120 investment here will actually bring about loss to the company. Loss in the sense that it will not even yield an interest rate of 10%. So the next step is to find out the difference between the two. $120 is the amount that is invested now. That is actually the present value of cash outflows. And the present value of cash inflows is just $100, which means that if you find out the net of it, that is present value of cash inflows minus present value of cash outflows, which means that negative 120 plus 100, you get a negative figure. A negative net present value indicates that this particular investment opportunity is not good for the company because it will not yield a return of even 10%. What was 10%? 10% was the cost of capital or the minimum return that we have to earn for any project, so that the lenders and the shareholders can be given their expected return. So this is the procedure that has to be adopted for evaluating any investment opportunity. So the crucial thing that you have to look into any kind of question is the cost of capital, which is nothing but the minimum return that we have to generate for any investment opportunity. So as a final summary, we can write as net present value is negative. In this particular case, it is negative 20. It means that the project is earning a return of less than 10%. Hence, reject the project. Now, in this evaluation, the calculation of discount factor is crucial. And the formula is 1 divided by 1 plus r the whole raised to n. Now, this calculation will be difficult if there are many number of years. You have to go on calculating this formula, that is 1 divided by 1 plus r the whole raised to n. And, the n keeps on changing. So it becomes difficult. So for our convenience, there is something called the present value table, which gives the calculated figures of these discount factors. So in the present value table, the column headings are the rate of interest and the row headings are the number of years. In the question that we had tackled, rate of interest was 10% and the year was 2. And we got the calculated answer as 0.826. We will just see the present value table and let's see whether this is the same figure that is given in the present value table. So just remember, the discount factor or the interest rate is 10% and the year is 2. So in the present value table, the interest rate is 10% and for the year 2, it is 0.826. So we get the very same figure that we had calculated using the formula. So instead of calculating the discount factor with the help of a calculator, that is 1 divided by 1 plus r the whole raised to n, all that we have to do is we have to look up the present value table. Just look at the percentage and also look at the year for which the discount factor has to be calculated. So we can just pick the figure instead of using a calculator to get the answer. Let's do a proper question on an investment appraisal using net present value method. So the details of the question are as follows. Initial outlay and possible annual cash inflows of a project are. So they have said that in year 0 or now, we have to make an investment of 60,000. That is why it is indicated as negative 60,000. So that is an investment that we have to make now for this particular project. And the cash inflows are for 3 years. It is not restricted to 1 year. 3 years, you will be receiving the cash inflows. In year 1, you will be receiving 23,350. In year 2, 29,100. And in year 3, $27,800. The company's cost of capital is 8% per annum. What was cost of capital? Cost of capital is the return that we have to give to the lenders and the equity shareholders, which means that for any investment opportunity, this is the minimum return that we should generate. What is the net present value? We will make a table. So in the table, you have the year running from 0 to 3. Year 0 is now, and the cash flows has been copied from the question. Negative 60,000 is coming in year 0. That is the investment outflow. And for year 1 to 3, I've again copied the figures into the answer. Since these inflows happens in different time periods, we cannot just take the net figure and find out the profit of a project. Because of the time value of money, we have to calculate the present value of each individual figure. And how do we calculate the present value? We have to multiply the future value with the discount factor. Only then we will get the present value because we know it from the formula. Now the discount factor in this particular case is 8%. So how do we find out the discount factor? We know that the formula is 1 divided by 1 plus r the whole raised to n, where r in this particular case, it is 0.08 because it's 8%. Now n runs from 1, 2 and 3. But should you actually use a calculator? No, we can resort to using the present value table where already the figures are calculated. And so just remember the rate of interest is 8% and the years is running from 1, 2, and 3. So this is the extracts of the present value table. So we need 8% interest and 1, 2, and 3 years. So we will copy these three figures into our answer because these are the discount factors pertaining to years 1, 2, and 3. Now, in order to calculate the present value, what should you do? We should multiply the future value with the discount factor. Now, for year 0, the investment is $60,000. Since it is a cash outflow, we have indicated it in brackets as a negative figure. You have to multiply it with 1 only. Why are we multiplying it with 1? Because 60,000 is investment now. That is already in present value terms. So negative 60,000 into 1 is again $60,000. 23,350 into 0.926 is 21,622. So we have converted that into present value terms. 29,100 into 0.857 is 24,939. 27,800 into 0.794 is equal to 2273, which means that all these figures are in the present value terms. Now we can net off. Now it is in the same terms. All the future values have been converted into the present value. And we have to find out the net present value. How do we find out the net present value? All that you have to do is you have to find out the difference between present value of cash inflows and present value of cash outflows. So we will add the last column to get the net present value as plus 8634. What is the meaning of positive NPV? Positive NPV means that this particular investment opportunity is generating a return of more than 8%, which means that we can accept the project. So the evaluation is as the net present value is positive, it means that the project is earning a return of more than 8%. Hence, accept the project. So here we come to an end of the introductory class of NPV. Stay tuned for the recap ahead.